A few days ago, news broke that marked the end of an era. After more than 20 years of almost uninterrupted broadcasting, the One Piece anime will no longer be a weekly series. Something that seemed impossible because One Piece has always been synonymous with consistency. Every Sunday, no matter what, there was a new episode, but that routine that has accompanied generations is about to change. Starting in 2026, after a 3-month hiatus, the anime will abandon its classic format and will start airing in seasons with a maximum of 26 episodes per year, a decision that surprised many, including the most veteran fans, and that at the same time makes a lot of sense if we consider the level of quality that One Piece has achieved in recent years. That is why today we are going to talk about why the animation studio made this decision, what it means for the industry, and why this change, far from being the end, could be the beginning of a new era. For almost 2 decades, One Piece was synonymous with consistency. Every Sunday, without fail, a new episode arrived on Japanese television. Wars, pandemics, generations of fans have passed, and anime has never stopped airing for more than a few months. One Piece was one of the last great exponents of the classic weekly anime, a format that defined an era and touched millions around the world. So when it was officially confirmed that One Piece would be ceasing its weekly schedule, the news didn't come as a surprise. It also marked the end of an era. The current arc will come to an end in December of this year, and from that moment on, the anime will enter a planned 3-month hiatus from January to March 2026, and will return in April with the BF arc, marking the beginning of a new era in anime history. Along with the announcement, new promotional images and costume redesigns for the main characters were also released. For years, One Piece represented resistance to a system that the rest of the industry had already left behind. While most anime adopted a seasonal format with breaks to maintain quality, Toei continued to deliver episodes week after week without prolonged interruptions. It was a seemingly unbreakable betrayal, but also a burden that was difficult to sustain in the industry that is increasingly demanding. Since the Wano arc, One Piece has made a visual leap forward, with fluid animation, cinematic scenes, top-notch art direction, and a staging that rivaled theatrical productions. But reaching that technical level also meant one thing: the weekly pace became unsustainable. But this change should not be seen as a loss, but rather as the result of an evolution. The weekly format was born at a time when anime was a continuous television product, designed to fill a time slot rather than create high-level visual experiences. But times have changed. Modern audiences prioritize quality, emotion, and impact. Anime like Kinnison Yaiba and Utsu Kaisen, or even the return of Bleach, have shown that the hiatus between seasons does not weaken interest, but rather amplifies it. That One Piece is now adopting this model is not a surrender, but a necessary transition. The end of the weekly format does not mean the end of the adventure, but rather the beginning of a more controlled, planned, and probably more spectacular stage. The new ship will be the starting point for this change, and if One Piece has shown anything in these more than 25 years, it is that it knows how to reinvent itself without losing its essence. When a company like Toei Animation makes a decision of this magnitude, it is not improvised or trendy. One Piece is a major project, a symbol of Japanese animation and one of the longest-running series on the air. Changing its structure after more than 20 years entails a profound transformation, carefully thought out and justified from various angles. The main reason is to delve deeper into the essence of the One Piece universe and offer a more condensed version of the story. This was stated, starting in 2026, the anime will adopt the production policy based on adapting one manga chapter for each anime episode, with a limit of up to 26 episodes per year. In practice, this means that Toei wants to bridge the gap between quality and pacing, avoiding dragging out scenes or slow-paced episodes, something that has probably remained the biggest complaint about One Piece for years. This decision also reflects a new mindset within the industry. In the past, the goal was to produce as many episodes as possible per year, regardless of the sacrifices involved in animation or planning. But today, the priority is different. Quality has become the new standard, and Toei knows it all too well. In the last and current arcs, One Piece achieved a level of animation that surprised everyone. The shots, cinematography, effects, and direction rivaled movie productions, but maintaining that level with a weekly format is crazy. Even with multiple teams alternating episodes, the weekly pace leaves no room for constant creative control. Modern anime that achieved outstanding animation work with much broader and more concentrated schedules. By moving to an annual format with fewer episodes, Toei will be able to plan each block with the same level of detail, giving animators, directors, and composers real time to maintain a high standard without putting the team's health at risk. And there's also a strategic aspect to this decision. Japanese television is no longer the only place anime is consumed. Streaming platforms like YouTube and global distribution have completely changed the way success is measured. Today, an anime doesn't need to air year-round to be relevant. It needs each season to feel like an event, and One Piece, with its reach, can take full advantage of that model. Each seasonal return is going to be a buzzword. It will have marketing campaigns and keep the hype alive between breaks, just like other anime. In short, Toei isn't scaling back One Piece. They're organizing it so that it can stand on its own 2 feet. The weekly format served its purpose for over 20 years, but it's no longer viable in the industry that's trying to balance ambition with reality. Adapting one manga chapter per episode, releasing only 26 episodes per year, and focusing all efforts on ensuring that each episode maintains its current quality is not a step backward, but rather an evolution. Toei doesn't just want One Piece to continue to exist, they want it to reach its end with the same energy and respect with which they began over 2 decades ago. What needs to be understood about this change is that it's not going to transform One Piece into something completely different. It's not a remake or a reboot, as is already planned elsewhere, but rather an evolution in the way the story is produced and presented. Starting in April, after a 3-month hiatus, the anime will return with a new ship, a completely new format, 26 episodes per year, adapting one manga chapter for each animated episode. This detail, which may not be important, completely changes the way the anime will develop from now on. Until now, the One Piece anime used to adapt less than one manga chapter per episode, which resulted in a slow pace and stretched out scenes in order to avoid reaching the source material. With Toei's new policy, that's over. The goal is for each episode to progress at the same pace as the manga, preserving the essence of each episode but better condensing the story. In theory, this should make the experience much more fluid, without those moments where the viewer feels like nothing is moving forward. Regarding the animation, the reality is that the current level of One Piece is already among the best in the industry. Since the Wano arc, the anime has delivered action sequences, direction, and color that surpass everything else. That's why we couldn't say that this change necessarily seeks to further raise the quality, but rather to keep it stable without wearing out the team. Ultimately, it's a sustainability strategy, producing fewer episodes, but all with a quality that justifies their existence. The breaks between seasons will give animators and directors time to plan without so much pressure from a weekly schedule, which can also open up space to experiment more with the style or narrative of each arc. But expectations must be kept realistic. Not every episode is going to look like a movie, and that's okay. The idea is not for each episode to be a blockbuster, but for the overall average to remain high without sudden drops in animation or direction. In addition, everything has been shown in recent years that it knows how to take advantage of breaks very well. The 6-month hiatus between October of last year and April of this year served to reorganize production, and the result was noticeable in the quality of the current art. But for those who followed One Piece for so many years, it will be an emotional adjustment. After more than 20 years of watching One Piece every week, having only 26 episodes a year can feel strange. There will be less content, but also more value in each episode. Each return is going to feel big, and each hiatus will serve to generate more hype. It is a format that has already proven to work in other titles, and One Piece has everything to benefit from that. What is coming is not a different One Piece, but a better organized One Piece, an anime that already needs to be on the air all year to demonstrate its relevance. With a more balanced pace, a more faithful adaptation, and a sustained technical level, anime enters a stage that combines the best of the past with the mindset of modern animation. Toei Animation's decision to completely modify the One Piece format not only affects anime, but is also a turning point for the entire industry. For decades, the weekly format was the foundation on which the great successes of Japanese television were built. Dragon Ball, Naruto, Bleach, and even One Piece itself were conceived to accompany the viewer's routine each week, becoming part of their lives. But that era is ending. In recent years, the industry has undergone a radical change. Audiences have changed, streaming platforms have replaced television as the main medium, and competition for attention has become fiercer. Anime can no longer rely solely on quantity. It must rely on quality and impact. That's why One Piece was one of the last great bastions of the classic model. Its transition to an annual format with 26 episodes per year is a sign of where the future of anime is headed. This decision also redefines the relationship between animation studios. For years, the industry operated at an inhuman production pace. Teams worked against the clock, delivering weekly episodes without having time to review or plan, which generated exhaustion, staff turnover, and uneven quality between episodes. By adopting a slower pace, Toei joins a trend that other studios had already started, prioritizing team health and artistic consistency over quantity. Furthermore, the change in One Piece can have a domino effect. If Japan's longest-running and most successful anime leaves the weekly format, other productions will follow suit. Bleach, Boruto, and Black Clover are also following this idea. All are signs of the same transformation. Weekly television is losing its place to the logic of more planned and cinematic seasonal production. And as we mentioned, the change also has narrative implications. With fewer episodes per year and a pace more in line with the manga, anime will be able to better care for the tone of each scene, the the development of the characters, and the direction of the arcs without relying on artificial extensions. It will no longer be necessary to fill time to avoid reaching for the source material, and this will allow the story to progress in a more natural and balanced way. From a historical point of view, One Piece's move to the seasonal format is symbolic, the closing of a century in the history of Japanese anime. For more than 20 years, the anime was living proof that the weekly model could still survive, but today that resistance is coming to an end, not as a failure, but as a sign of adaptation. The industry can no longer sustain the same production speed as 2 decades ago, and Toei understood this better than anyone. In short, Toei Animation's decision to change the format of One Piece does not mean weakness, but evolution. After more than 2 decades of an almost uninterrupted mission, it was inevitable that anime would adapt to the current times. The industry no longer operates under the same rules. That in the 2000s and maintaining a weekly production with the quality level of One Piece is unfeasible. The new format of 26 episodes per year with a better adaptation of the manga seeks balance. Less quantity but more control, more planning and more consistency. That does not mean that each episode is going to be a blockbuster, but that the general average is going to be high and coherent. It has also shown that when it has time it delivers impressive results and the new structure gives them just that. For most, the change is going to be strange. For years, One Piece was routine, but now with defined seasons and breaks in between, each return is going to be more special, fewer episodes, but more value. And if the result maintains the level of Buedo, and that of the current art, the old rhythm may not be missed so much. One Piece is not ending. It is only changing the way it is told. The adventure continues, but under a more modern and sustainable model that respects both the team that produces it and the story it adapts. It is a necessary logical step and probably the only possible way for anime to reach the end of the journey without losing its quality or identity.